Okay, so what I'm going to show you guys is some aseptic transfer procedure. Right now I'm labeling my rack with the organisms the name of the organisms that I'm using. I do not want to. I also have the tubes labeled, but I've always found it best to, with these organisms, you can't tell what they look like just from the outside, so labeling is very important. So I'm going to finish labeling this and I'm going to show you some aseptic transfer. I'm going to show you a transfer from a slant to a slant, and I'm going to show you a transfer from a slant to a broth. Okay? Alright, so what you guys are going to be using is some E. coli in the lab. Now I want to do this aseptically, and I want to do it by the book so that you guys can see how it's done by the book. These are the organisms that I need to transfer. The first thing that you've got to do is disinfect your bench. Okay? Disinfect your bench. And in microbiology, we understand that disinfectants work best whenever they're left on the organism for as long as possible. So you're going to notice that I'm wiping the disinfectant around the bench, okay, but I'm not going to dry it. I'm going to leave it just like that, okay, and I'm going to work on top of it just like that. It's okay to continue working after it dries, but you want the wet disinfectant on the bacteria as long as possible. That's what kills them, okay? So what I want to do is get my heat source here. I'm using a little butane torch today. My wire inoculating loop. Okay, the first thing I need to do is sterilize my loop. So I'm going to get in the flame, and the hottest part of the flame is always at the very tip. Okay, here you see the hottest part is right at the tip of this deep blue in the middle there, right there. You want the wire to glow red hot. Okay, I'm going to even get up on the stem a little bit. Okay, that is now sterile and also very hot. So before I make the transfer, I need to cool this down a little bit. So the environment around this flame is the most sterile. I can't hold it up next to me. I'm shedding organisms, okay? I want to let this inoculating loop cool down close to the flame. The reason being is this hot flame is actually bringing in air like this and throwing it up and out. Okay, so any bacteria that I'm shedding, or your partner might shed, is going to fall into this area and actually be carried away. Okay, so even you'll notice as I'm making this transfer, I'll be working close to the flame. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's see, let me make a quick check. I need to make some slants of Bacillus subtilis, okay, for you guys to work with. Here's my organism, B sub. I'm going to scoot it over here into my area where I can work. And the first thing I need to do, all right, I've already sterilized my loop. Now I need to flame the end of this tube, okay, and the end of this tube. This is my organism. This is my sterile tube. I'm going to uncap my organism, and now any bacteria organism that is somehow or another around that lip of that tube, it's now dead. I've just flamed it. Also, the same principle applies. This glass tube is now hot, and any air current is being forced away from it. So any bacteria that's likely to be in this area would more than likely fall away. I'm going to take my loop, which is now cooled. I'm going to insert it into the tube and take a sample on the end of my inoculating loop. I'm going to retorch my tube and recap it. All right, notice I work basically around the flame. Okay, I'll now replace my organism, and once again I'm going to take the cap off my sterile tube, flame it, and introduce my organism. And on the slant, what I'll do is I'll spread it around. Remember, we talked about the surface area. I've got a lot of surface area now to grow the B sub, reflame the tube, recap it. You've just seen an aseptic transfer from slant to slant. Okay? The last thing I need to do in order to complete this particular process is reflame my loop. I want to make it red, completely red. That means that everything is dead. Not even a spore can withstand this kind of heat. Okay? So, the next thing I want to do is you guys will be using some E. coli broth. So I'm going to get my E. coli organism here. And here's a broth tube. Okay, here's your broth tube. I'm going to take my organism, E. coli, uncap it, flame my tube top. My loop has probably cooled enough now, but in case it hasn't, I'm going to take the loop and go in and gently rest it on the glass on the inside. And that cool glass is going to suck out the rest of the heat in that loop. You don't want to put a hot loop on organisms and fry them, okay? You can't get an effective transfer if you do that. So now I'm going to get my inoculum, reflame, okay? Here's my broth. I'm going to uncap it, flame my tube top, and I'm going to take my inoculating loop and I'm going to agitate it and shake off as much of that inoculum into the broth as I can. Okay? Reflame my tube top, recap it, and the last thing I need to do is to reflame my loop. And that's how you do aseptic transfers in the microbiology lab.